Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War Bargain Hunter event, in which the Satyr Hunter is added to the game, and of course it is Thanksgiving this week, so happy Thanksgiving everyone, and of course best of luck with all of your bargain hunting this weekend with Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all that. I know I'll definitely be picking up a lot of stuff, so keep an eye out. Other than that, let's get into things. So, of course, Satsar Hunter, relatively useless. Comes with a brown green, not too many things to trait with that. Mostly the Soothsayer and Dragatar early on in the game, and then later on in the game, getting Sylvania more for the consistent entangle. The only other thing you really use them for is possibly a few Delve troops that end up requiring them, but a really small amount of things end up needing that trait stone overall. As far as this troop, not really going to be used for much. It is the third troop in the game to have an X shape. Dragonian Monk was, or technically Dragonian Rogue was the first, however it used to have a different way that it implemented it. Then it was Dragonian Monk, which had the targetable X, then Dragonian Rogue ended up getting the targetable X, and now we have a third targetable X, which is now of course the Satyr Hunter. This is going to be relatively bad, mostly because compared to something like Dragonian Monk, there really isn't any point in using any X-shaped mechanic that isn't him, just because 4 times barrier is excessively good value, whereas this is going to be doing a little bit of attack buff to your first ally. Definitely not a bad buff to consider earlier on in the game, as you could use as an alternative Stargazer, but other than that, it isn't really going to be used for much. I would say in almost every situation, you're better off just using Dragonian Monk, and there just isn't really a place for him. If you really needed a tank and something to gain stats in early game, you would just use a Dragatar there, and if you wanted something that still had the X shape, you would just use Dragonian Monk. So I don't really see what the purpose of him will really be, as there are already troops that can basically do what he does, but better. Other than that, he does have the capability of doing Hunter's Mark, so he will be able to get a little bit of extra damage there. However, the way that his mechanic is shaped, it's more so to buff others and not himself, so it's a little bit weird that they would even give him that trait. And he also has 20% dodge, both two things that kind of make him seem like he should be used in first slot. However, his ability does not reflect that. He's set up as a support troop, yet his traits are set up as a first slot troop, so it doesn't really make much sense as far as what on earth his role is. You'd probably just put him in second slot and kind of use him as a bit of both. But overall, not really going to be worth using, and that's that guy. Other than that, as far as event things this week, of course, it is Thanksgiving, and we do have a Battle Crasher. One funny thing about Battle Crashers, last year they ended up doing this around Thanksgiving time before Battle Crashers were even a thing, because I believe they came in earlier this year as far as the mechanic of Battle Crashers. But this was technically the original Battle Crasher, as this ended up coming in last year's Thanksgiving, and then it became an actual mechanic in the game where they occasionally, for various holidays, give us a thing that we could basically go kill it out and get some resources. In this case, of course, for all this week, we'll be able to go and find a bunch of Moes in various battles in PvP and Explore, and if we end up killing one of the Moes, you end up getting 500 gold each, so you can end up farming a lot of gold out of that. This also ends up stacking with the actual event thing as well, where you can use the Satyr Hunter for additional 400 gold in PvP and Explore, meaning that you could stack those for a 900 additional gold gain. Of course, not much of a use in using this on your team. However, if you did want to stack to go get a bunch of gold, if your team can hold up with only 3 troops, then might as well, as that could potentially be an additional 900 gold per battle, which isn't too bad. Other than that, we have 10% to all Fae and 10% to all Wild Folk. Not too much overlap with that, but nonetheless, still going to be a decent amount of stats there, mostly being used with Wild Folk, as it is a Wild Folk event this weekend. As far as event keys, there are a few things that are worth going for as far as what is actually available. If we go over, of course, to the Wild Folks tab underneath the Kingdom thing here, and go over to the not that. It's actually underneath the Penn's Veil is where they all are going to be, as that is the event week. If we just go over to that and click Show All, if you don't already have all of them, everything here except for the 4 Warren's troop is what will be available this week. So the 4 that aren't available here are the Bunnycorn, the Luna, the Lapina Knight, and the where did the 4th one go? And the Trickster. Everything else you see here will be available through the event keys. The most noteworthy things to really get from these are going to mostly be the Wild Queen, as well as King Salinas. Wild Queen definitely being the absolute most sought after. However, she is the mythic, so she is a relatively low drop rate. You might see me using her in things like Guild Wars. She's a really great skull option. She ended up getting buffed earlier this year, and ever since that buff, she has been extremely good because they ended up increasing the amount of gem spawn that she'll end up doing with each cast, and she ends up getting to steal a bunch of attack, also creating a bunch of skulls, which obviously synergize quite well into each other, since you could lower the enemy's attack to be very low, increasing your own allies' attack to be very high, while also being able to create skulls, meaning you'll get high impact off it, while the enemy will get very low impact off those skulls. Really great for Guild Wars, really great for pretty much any piece of content, though I feel like I use it most for Guild Wars and Tower of Doom, more so than anything, though it can also be used for delves, it can be used for PvP, and the only place I'd say it wouldn't really be too good for is Explore, just because it's not necessarily the quickest of options, but it's really good at not losing, which is obviously good in the modes that you don't necessarily want to lose in, but it's not necessarily one of the quicker options that exist in the game. I think King Salinas, he himself isn't really too good. The main reason he's actually gotten, for any reason, is because he has both Impervious into a 50% Wild Folk bonus. Wild Folks at the moment, the biggest issue with this 50% Wild Folk bonus, and one of the reasons why I wouldn't put him like really high up as far as Legends are concerned, is mainly a lot of Wild Folks already naturally have like 50% mana start, 75% mana start. If I'm not mistaken, a few of them even have Empowered, and yeah, it's not really going to do much because all these Wild Folks, a good majority of them, I think almost half, have some amount of mana start already on the troop itself. It's the kind of problem that Beast has more often than not, in which a lot of Beasts have a natural mana start, and Wild Folks kind of the same exact way. So King Salinas doesn't really get much usage for that reason, as the only few things you could really use it with are the Queen and a few other niche instances, and it's just not enough to really have the coverage to make it worth going out of your way for. Basically meaning the only really good drop is, again, the Mythic this week, similar to that of last week. And most of the other stuff here you'd pretty much never really use, as it's either just only good in early game or just not really viable. Luna is good, however, of course she is not in the drop table. She's specifically from the Warren's portal if you want to go and get her. She is, of course, a Wild Folk, so she would be able to help with the event week if you so want to use her. And that, of course, if you do want to go and do that, is over at the Warrens right over here, and you would just go throw these portals down, and these would be able to give you those other 4 troops like Trickster, Luna, and the Bunny, and the other one there. But yeah, you just be able to do that if you want to go and get her that way, since she is not in the event queue drop table. As far as the guild event, of course, we have invasions this week, and as far as that, there are 2 teams that you could use. This is the cheaper of the 2, and of course, all teams that we will be showing in this video are in the description below, as well as commented below if you just want to go and copy paste any of them. So right here, basically what we're going to go and do is get our mana rolling. Looks like we got a nice little explosion at the start, which can already allow us to go right into an instant kill. I did forget to take the extra turn there, unfortunately. But as far as this team, this ends up using 2 new troops that end up coming in through invasion this week, of course. The first is the Ribatrissa. She ends up stealing 4 armor and converting that into attack, which basically means almost nothing. However, given that she could have potentially up to 5 times boost ratio, does mean that is theoretically about 20 additional damage per skull, since you're eventually going to come to a point where you're up against 4 towers. However, that's not really much of a bonus, being able to steal that small of an amount. Other than that, it gets to deal damage to an enemy, just like the standard amount, and of course up to 5 times to the towers, assuming that you have it fully ascended. The only other relevant thing it has is it does have a natural half mana start, so you don't need to use King Salinas. As I mentioned, a lot of Wild Folk already have mana starts, so King Salinas doesn't really need to get used, and she is no different, already having it attached to her. So she'll be able to get her mana a little bit quicker without having to go to your way to put a useless troop onto your team. Other than that, this is the new weapon. It is the Glaive of Many Goats. It is a brown-red, so same coloration of Mang and stuff like that, which means it's up against a lot of competition for good weapons, and for that reason, it's rather average. It just deals damage to an enemy, similar to any of the other double convert weapons, or double spawn weapons based on the typing. This is specifically for Wild Folk. Ends up creating a bunch of green and yellow for these Wild Folk, and yeah, just functions the same as any of the other ones. It's not really too particularly useful, but still would advise getting it, of course, in case Wild Folk ever become useful. Of course, there is a decent hero class for it, Bard. This weapon does have a little bit of a weird synergy, or lack thereof, in that this is, the Bard hero class is extremely yellow based, and while this thing does create yellow, and you could use it on teams that are using a bunch of yellow, it itself is not a yellow. If they would have made it so it actually used yellow, while also still spawning yellow, this thing probably would have been one of the better the double spawning weapon things. But they didn't end up making it like that, so rather average or slightly below average. As there isn't normally, you don't normally build around wild folk. It is very, very rare that you would ever go out of your way to build around a wild folk team, other than, of course, this event this week for invasions. But there's that, and since I might as well show it while we're already doing it, let me go show the other team here. So here's the slightly more expensive team. This one actually does end up using the King Salinas, and this is mostly just because I want to give the Wild Queen its mana start, and doing it this way we'll be able to do so. So let me go, oops, that's not the right location. Let me go over and just put this over to invasions, and then we could go show this one as well. So here's one that would upscale a little bit better. One other thing that you can do for this, I wanted to show it with a Mang, just because it's cheaper that way. But of course, if you have Earth's Fury is a great thing to put over top of that Mang, as it's one of the few instances where Earth's Fury is actually better than a Mang is during tower events, because that extra attack that you would end up giving it is basically 1.6 times the value that you would normally have. A Earth's Fury has a 1-to-3 boost ratio, and given that this has a 5 times boost ratio, that basically comes down to a 1.66 additional amount of damage compared to that of what a base value of Mang would do. So really good idea to go and use Earth's Fury with this team. However, Mang also ends up working if you do not have a option, or if you don't have the Earth's Fury as a option. But we'll take that down and just get the last little bit of poke. I kind of want to poke him again with that. I guess we could actually use King Salinas to do something for once. And then we just kill that out, and we already won. And you would just rinse and repeat that, and that'd be able to upscale all the way. Only real big issue with it is it does use Wild Queen, and it is a bit more optimal with Earth's Fury. Two things that people might not necessarily have, but if you do, definitely go and run it all out, and it should be able to run through the event and upscale as far as you want to go. As far as other things this week, we have ourselves this Tuesday, we're going to be having the Wild Court faction. So if you want to go do anything with that, that will be available. It's a red-green faction. This Wednesday, we're going to be having a Billy Goat, which I believe is Pan's Veil bonus. This Thursday, we have no event, because this Friday, we're going to be getting a new hero class. This new hero class is very similar to that of Warrior. It's pretty much just a copy of Warrior, just with a Death Tree instead of the Morale Tree that Warrior has. Overall, I feel like they are both similarly useless. There are very few situations where you would need that much extra damage on top of each other. Their main gimmick is that they have a enrage into a triple damage, so they have 1.5 times damage that hits through any kind of traits, while also having a triple damage on burning. This thing has a few bit of true damage on it, in that it can bleed all enemies whenever you get a kill, as well as having some life steal on it. However, this is almost a bad thing, because there are, of course, troops that have traits that will trigger whenever they take damage to life, and since this thing will constantly keep doing small pokes of life damage, this is going to be a relatively bad hero class. I think even Warrior will end up being better than this thing, which is a pretty low bar as far as trying to be better than a hero class. Not the lowest of bars, it's not like a knight hero class, but it's probably a slightly below average hero class that is similar to the most recent one that we just got. Is going to be pretty useless and almost never used, since if you already have Warrior upgraded, you might as well just use Warrior rather than ever investing into this thing, and you'd only really ever get it up for Kingdom upgrading purposes and never really touch the class other than that. And to get the weapon, however, the weapon is useless and only really considered for completion purposes. So yeah, not really much this weekend, though I guess that's good since it is a holiday, so you won't need to worry about as much this weekend in that regard. Other than that, also since the class event actually kind of worked out pretty well, the class event's not falling on a Thursday, so you don't even need to worry about that on Thanksgiving, so go figure. That actually ended up working out perfectly. I guess they planned that ahead of time to get the class event on that specific day. Didn't even think about that till just now, but I guess that does work 100% perfectly. Other than that, Troops and Soulforge, there's nothing worth crafting. You can pretty much just ignore that this week and just save up diamonds for something else that you might be looking for. As far as weapons, there are definitely a decent one to go for. Of course, the glaive you can just simply get from the event, so just go do that. The other one that we have here is Yasmine's Pride. 100% do not leave this week without getting this weapon. It is so good. It is, you probably see me using this in Tower of Doom the most. It is pretty much an auto-win Tower of Doom weapon, assuming you have at least one other troop that can boost based on HP. One thing that this is extremely noteworthy with if you happen to have picked it up last week, is Catches the Bull. If you have a Catches the Bull, Yasmine's Pride is pretty much the best synergy that you could do. You pretty much just Yasmine's Pride, you use a mana generator to go get Yasmine's Pride and Ketris up, and then you just use Ketris and just double kill the entire team with Ketris after you've used Yasmine's Pride a few times. Really great option for Tower of Doom and dungeons. So if you're, Tower of Doom and Delves, I meant to say. So if you're still struggling in either of those two locations, this is an insanely good weapon to consider getting, and I highly advise getting it. It gets to tear all of an armor like a Mang, and then gives a bunch of life boost to your entire team. Great for surviving any kind of game mode, and obviously anything that has an HP boost ratio you'll be able to utilize with this. The only main exception to that is Sunbird, since it kind of kills itself out and wastes most of that boost ratio. However, anything that keeps the boost ratio after casting, similar to Ketris and any of the other Tars from that Wild Plains Kingdom, end up working out decently with it, and pretty much anything in general that has a HP boost ratio that doesn't kill itself out like Sunbird. Other than that, do keep in mind this one's kind of hidden over here, but don't forget Sleigh Bells is available. This was a Christmas event thing from a few years back, but a lot of people probably still don't have it. It's a completely useless weapon and an extremely dated weapon. However, if you want it for completionist purposes, it is here, and don't forget that it's hiding in between all the other stuff. Though if you were to craft anything, obviously Yasmine's Pride is the way to go, so definitely make sure to pick that up. Other than that, let's go over a bunch of teams. So a couple of them we already went over with the thing, but here's a couple of them. Here, of course, is the one that we went for over Invasions. This is the cheaper version. This will be able to get you through the earlier battles, or probably the whole thing, or if you're just doing the enough to go to Tier 3 or Tier 4, this should be perfectly fine if you're not going for leaderboard or anything like that, which most people generally don't. Other than that, you can upscale and try using a Mang or Earth's Fury related team. If you want, you could even use a Mang first slot and keep it safer if you want to go and tank up if you're having trouble finding your things or dying too much. Other than that, of course, you could replace out into Earth's Fury if you have it to make it even stronger. And of course, you could put a replace out the Wild Queen for a mana accumulation method, similar to how we did in this first one where we used Trickster as a mana accumulation method. You could do the same thing with this if you happen to lack the Wild Queen as a option, and simply use the Mang up front in order to have more of a tanking capability, and just roll it that way. Other than that, as far as faction, for the first, if you're just doing it for free, you can end up just using a standard Gargoyle team, just feeding them up, tanking up with a Mountain Crusher, then Apothecary to feed them up and get all the mana, get all the cleanse, and just double kill off of the Gargoyle. Works very similar to that of a Ketris, except it just boosts based on attack, and just use a bunch of attack bonuses and end up killing it out pretty easily. Other than that, if you want to run through the entire event, you can use a version of Truffle. The restrictions are green and red, and given that green is one of the restrictions, you can simply just go double Truffle into mana accumulation. Since red is an option, one thing that you can consider too is completely ditch your hero and go with Mirage Queen and end up using Mirage Queen as your tank. This will help you cover red while also being able to go and give all your greens converted over to Doom Skulls, and this will of course be able to go and end up dealing a lot of damage, and on top of that we'll also be able to give your King Gob Truffles a bunch of mana start. Since they are elemental, you'd be able to start with half mana off of that. Other than that, yeah, you can pretty much just run this with either Warden or Titan. Warden is the more offensive option. This will give you, you won't have Barrier or anything like that. However, this will give you the option of having Dispel and Greenstorm at start. Greenstorm at start will help you get rolling a bit quicker, and the Dispel will help to make sure you don't have to deal with Submerge, as all your damage is full AoE, and that will be able to make sure you get rid of Submerge, so you don't have to deal with anything like that. That will end up stopping you. Other than that, we have ourselves the faction, pure faction, if you want to go and run that all the way to the end this Tuesday. As far as what you would use is you would double up on the Wild Knights, use a Puka, and then use the Wendigo. The Wild Knights are basically the main part of your team and the one that you're going to be focusing on the most. It has a single gem explode for a little bit of board control while gaining a lot of life and attack, and this is boosted based on greens destroyed, and it gains barrier. You're basically going to keep spamming your first slots and keep getting him as tanky as possible and make sure he doesn't die. He has 33% score reduction, he'll be able to get some Hunter's Mark, and overall should be your main focus, and you can probably solo the entire thing just by boosting him up and going from there. The second Wild Knight is in case your first Wild Knight somehow dies in one of the battles due to bad luck. The Puka is just here to do a little bit of mana drain and feed some reds, and those reds go into your Wendigo, which you're not really ever going to be casting. You're pretty much not going to cast them unless you can get a kill off it, which will give you Bless for a short duration, or, you know, until you end up acting out of it with an ability or skull. But yeah, the main reason you use them is because you can end up getting random Hunter's Mark whenever you get red, and you're obviously going to be getting a lot of red from the Puka doing it with its mana accumulation while being able to mana drain the enemy. But the main part of this team is just keep spamming Wild Knight until you win. And that's pretty much the whole premise of Pure Faction. Obviously, with potion effects and everything, you'd have a much higher effect there. You'd probably have in the 70 range, if not higher. And yeah, just keep spamming him until he gets overpowered enough to solo the entire team, and then solo the entire enemy team. And that's all you'd have to do for Pure Faction there. Other than that, this weekend we have or this Friday, we'll end this weekend. So it goes throughout the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We, of course, have the class event. Not really that good of a class. However, we will be restricted to Drakzoom dwarfs. And as far as what kind of options you'll have for that, you could end up using a Mountain Crusher with a Mora. This is actually one of the old, what is this, Invasion or Raid? This is one of the old Raid troops. However, one of the things that still makes this relevant is that it gets to convert all greens to Doom Skulls. So you have all green to Doom Skull, you then have all blue to Doom Skull, and you'll have some poke damage off of her, some poke damage off of King Salinas, and you have the Bone Binder, which will also be able to create some Doom Skulls, as well as having a backup summon. Of course, a backup summon is good for doing class events, particularly if you're trying to maximize your amount of points for leaderboard. Because if you every single time you end up getting a death, it'll count as 1 point loss. However, if you finish the battle by resummoning that troop that died, you will be able to preserve that point and get it back. So as long as you make sure you finish every single one of those teams with 4 troops, you do not get penalized at all in points when doing class events. So if you're in a area or trying for a leaderboard where 1 or 2 points could make a whole difference on you making or not making a leaderboard spot, it is definitely worth considering carrying a summoner just in case. And given that you're running a lot of Doom Skulls, or likely would, regardless of what kind of team you run, since there's only like 7 options, I think, for what you have to choose from, you're going to want to have that summoner so you can make sure you preserve your points. And of course, what option you're using first really can vary depending on where you want to go. Of course, you could go Mang or something else that can buff up, though I'd say going Mountain Crusher as a safer method, probably the way to go, and just use Doom Skull off the other ones to go be your damage and just be able to kill it out that way. And lastly, this is something I just wanted to show real quick. Obviously, this is one of the things that you could use, for example, a Green Doom. If you wanted to go do Green Doom with this, this would also be applicable to any kind of factions if you wanted to upscale that way. If you wanted to go do any faction that includes green, which includes Tomorrow faction, if you want to go and, for example, use this for Tomorrow. But yeah, this is basically just an option that you can use for any of anything that upscales. Not something you would want to run for Guild Wars. This is not a green Guild War team, but for any kind of upscaling green location like Delves or Tower of Doom, this is definitely something to consider if you happen to have picked up some Ketruses the other week. If you don't have a second Ketrus, what you can end up replacing this with is anything that has a HP boost ratio similar to him. So like the other troops have a 1-to-3 boost ratio rather than a 1-to-2, or anything that has more support for your Ketrus, either to keep him alive or to give him more stats. Anything else like that would be your option for that. But as far as how this normally runs, as far as Yasmine's Pride, you go and use that a couple times in order to go and boost your HP. You then go and, let's see, I'm actually going to go and grab that first. Oh, whoops, I was going to go feed it into that. I didn't realize we were already blocking because of the mana drain that it did off there. But you want to go and get Yasmine's Pride. You're going to want to do this a couple times, and now you throw your Ketruses down. The way that Ketrus works, if you happen to have gotten him the other week, is you throw him at 2nd slot, you throw him at 4th slot, and then you won. And if they're somehow not dead yet, the 1st slot normally needs an extra skull or 2, which you can easily just take after the fact, and boom, you won. And that's basically the premise of how Yasmine's Pride Ketrus goes. You just go Yasmine's Pride a few times, throw Ketrus at 2nd, throw Ketrus at 4th, take a skull or 2 if the 1st slot's still not dead, and that's how a good majority of your teams go. Depending on what kind of thing that you're in, as far as the battle, you might need to cast Yasmine's Pride as much as all 4 times on each one of them, like if you're doing it really high-level delves. But it really just depends on level range, and you can kind of gauge it based on the piece of content that you're doing. Not advised to use in PvP, though it is, as you can see, technically possible to use in PvP. It is mostly a delve and basically any kind of green restriction that isn't Guild War kind of option. Anything that can upscale that has a green restriction is the kind of things that you tend to use that for. Not necessarily just green, but any kind of thing that you can end up incorporating a life gain into that can actually end up utilizing specifically that life gain as damage, or the things that you want to use Yasmine's Pride for. Definitely 100% get that weapon. Probably the most noteworthy thing that's even happening all this week is the fact that Yasmine's Pride is available for the people who have not been able to get it for so long. Since, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time it has been in Soulforge since its release like 2 years ago, so 100% definitely go and get it. But anyways, guys, that'll wrap it up for this video. I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving, a wonderful Black Friday, a wonderful Cyber Monday, and hope you all find a lot of deals and have a good time with your family. I'll catch all of you later, and have a wonderful week. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.